and welcome. It's all you.
Thank you very much. I think I should stay here now for the microphone.
Or you can use this one if you want.
Well, it's fine. I will try here. And we'll see. Well, thanks for the invitation and the introduction. I will present you today so the work that we are doing on the other side of the Pyrenees. That is so in the group we are interested in understanding the control of morphogenesis. So control and morphogenesis are keywords, and particularly to understand how tissue remodel and reorganize during this process. So what you can see here is on this very pixelated movie. It's Drosophila embryo, so it's EM stack that have been put together and show the full embryogenesis of the Drosophila embryo. And what you can see is that there's a lot of rearrangement and remodeling, and how this is controlled and how this is regulated still remain a key question in the field. And we're interested in understanding this. And particularly today, I will talk about essentially epithelial sealing, that is fundamental process in development. So about epithelial sealing, so this occurs in many different processes. I give only a few examples to tell you where it takes place. One important one is during neural tube closure, where you have the sealing and the fusion of the neural tube all along the body axis of the animal. Another example of epithelial sealing is palate closure, where you have the fusion of the palate from one side to the other that takes place here. And another one that I took is also the eyelid closure that takes place in order to allow the morphogenesis of the eye. So in the group, we are interested in understanding how sealing, epithelial sealing takes place. And for that, we use two model systems. The first one, that is this one, that is during development, during Drosophila development. We use Drosophila as a model. We have a process that resembles neural tube closure in terms of gene regulation and in terms of mechanics. That is called dorsal closure. And we are interested in understanding how this is regulated, how the forces are generated, regulated, and how this works. And recently, we put a strong emphasis on another aspect, which is wound healing, where we generate cuts into the lateral epidermis, and then we verify, we see how this close and how we try to understand the mechanics of that. I won't talk about that, but if you're interested, we can discuss later on the coffee. Okay, so today I will focus on Drosophila dorsal closure and the effort that we have spent, I would say, in the last 10-15 years to try to understand about this process. So it's actually this is the first paper on this process. It's 30 years ago, this particular year. So it's a very well investigated. Many groups have worked on it. I just put few papers here, but there are much more. And what we know about this process, we know it's regulated by a central pathway that is called Jun kinase pathway, and with DPP, that is a morphogen that is important for this process. And in terms of forces, we know that there is this central tissue that is called the amnioserosa tissue that generates a contraction and that will pull on the epidermis. There is an actin cable that we don't see here because actin is not labeled, that is surrounding the opening that also generates forces. And then there is an epithelial zipping that occurs here. So I will describe several of these aspects today. I will start by trying to understand the contraction of this central tissue that is the amnioserosa. What do we know about tissue contraction? So the classical view, the classical model, is what we call apical constriction. It's a process in which you have actin and myosin that basically accumulate at the apical site of the tissue, and by doing so, the myosin filament generate forces and then pull on the adherent junction and generate the contraction of the tissue. Okay, so this is what happened during gastrulation, and this is myosin that is labeled, and you see that myosin accumulate at the apical site and then will generate a contraction of the tissue. This has been very well studied by particularly the group of Eric Wischhaus. During dorsal closure, it's more complex. and you can see that what we observe and what is that there are pulses. The cell generates these pulses of contraction that are always there, and we have flows of actin and myosin that we can see here. But there's no real apical constriction in the fact that myosin do not accumulate apically as it is in that particular example. And more, I don't have the ability. More particularly, if you downregulate myosin in the central tissue, it still closes, and it actually closes even faster. So that tells us that it works by a different means. So how does it work? In order to understand that, we had to try to combine different types of imaging. So this is confocal microscopy, and then what we used is light sheet microscopy to do transverse view of the embryo. And this is the amniocerosa tissue that you see now, that is very thin. It's a very not thin tissue, and it remains thin until the end. It will elongate apicobasally only towards the end of the process. Okay. So which suggests something if it contracts in one direction, it does not elongate in the other. It tells you that some volume has to disappear. And we got interested into this and tried to basically follow volume of individual cells by doing single cell imaging and quantify the volume of the cells. And what we could observe is that indeed we have a reduction on tissue volume and in cell volume, about 40% of the cell volume that disappear during this process. Okay, so how come cellular volume is shrinking? So there is one process that is known for very long, in which cell shrinks, and this is apoptosis. When you have apoptosis, you have ion fluxes, and the cell volume shrinks in order to dismantle the cell and to have the different part of the cell that are basically can be engulfed by macrophages. We knew that this tissue is apoptotic, but we didn't know when apoptosis was triggered. So for that, we tried to identify caspase activity. So this is a caspase marker. If you see the fluorescence in the cytoplasm, basically the cells are fully alive. If the fluorescence go into the nucleus, then caspase are active. And what we could observe is that the fluorescence go into the nucleus at the onset of the process, and all the cells together, there's a collective behavior. They all activate apoptosis at the same time. And if we block apoptosis, or if we block high potassium channel, then we block this volume loss, the cell elongates earlier, and we impair the process. So basically the contraction is slower, and basically it's not contracting. Okay, so the volume decrease is important for the contraction. So for that, with Guillaume Salbreux, a collaborator, we designed a physical model of the process. Just to explain this simple equation, it's the kinetics of closure that depends on the different forces and tension that is in the tissue, and there is a term that emerges from the volume of the cell. That is a term that emerges from the internal pressure of the cell, and by measuring each of the different terms that we had here, we could actually fit the wild type, the cell shape changes, wild type and mutant with only 2 free parameters for the same for all of them. And so basically what I told you, and that's the end of this first part, is that basically what we have is that at the beginning of the closure, the cell activate apoptosis, and then through ion fluxes, they shrink, and this generates a force that basically pull on the tissue. So this is interesting because apoptosis is a very generic process that occurs several times in development. And we could imagine that this type of mechanical forces triggered by apoptosis can occur in many different other places. Okay, that's what I told you, cell shrink by apoptosis. So now I will still continue talking about this tissue, but I will come back to these pulses. This is something that fascinated us for years, and that we basically got interested in describing. We have done several work, I'm not discussing about that. But what I want to talk today is particularly of the introduction of the interaction that we have between myosin, that you see in green, that is flowing within the cell, and cadherin, that is in red, the junction that basically you see that have cycle of compression and of extension all the time, okay? And interestingly, well, with this resolution, I'm not sure it's very easy to see, but the cadherin is not homogeneous, and what we could observe is that there are gaps when they stretch, like here, for example, and when these gaps appears, then it seems that myosin is recruited there, okay? But this is just on few examples, so if we want to basically to quantify that, we develop methods to try to generate data, to generate what we call an average cell. So on one hand, we scan the periphery of the cell, and we average the cell border, and on the other hand, we scan the inside and locate where the myosin is within the cell. Okay, so by that mean, we can follow individual cells over time and generate the average cell over time. Okay, and what we could observe is that you have hotspot of myosin at the cell border, and those hotspots anti-correlate with the hotspot of cadherin all the time. So basically, myosin goes preferentially where cadherin is not, or where cadherin is depleted. In order to go further, we develop a basic experiment where we compress embryo in order to stretch the tissue, to try to basically see whether we can translocate myosin by that mean. So that's what we observed. So the cells are pulsating. They are happily pulsating when we don't compress them. And now we compress, we stop the pulsation, and myosin locates at the cell boundaries all the time. So we could average that, and we show that there is an enrichment of myosin there at the cell border. So interestingly, then we wondered what happens then if we release the stress, okay? And this is what we observed, is that then myosin comes back from the junction to the center of the cell, all together, synchronized, and they restart to pulse, like as if nothing happened, okay? So this is reversible. The cells are mechanosensing. We can narrate the pulse or not, just based on mechanics. That's average cell resistance. Another thing that is interesting on this, and I want to highlight, is that when we release the stress, the junctions are very wiggly. There's a lot of wrinkle, and those wrinkles are removed really quickly. And so this is something that we quantified. We quantified the junctional removal as a function of the straightness of the cell, and we observed that this as well seems to be mechanosensitive. So if the junction is wiggly, endocytosis is very quickly and takes place to remove junction. If the junction is straight, there is no removal. Okay, so that's what is quantified here. And by that mean, we could draw the following phase diagram of how the cell do contract. And basically, they contract along the diagonal, that they follow this diagonal. If they go in this region of the phase diagram, meaning that the junctions are overstretched, myosin goes to the junction and bring back the system here by generating a contraction. On the other hand, if the cells have a lot of ruffles, then those ruffles are removed by endocytosis and bring back here. And that makes that basically the junctions are constantly compressing and extending and following this diagonal for the compression. Okay, so what I told you is about this tissue. I told you that they shrink in volume and that they are mechanosensitive, and this allows to control the shape of the junction and the length of the junction over time. Okay. Now I will talk about what happened after this tissue contract, which is the zipping. And this is what happened at the end of the process. And what you have is that you have a progressive zipping of the tissue that allow to assemble the segments of the animal. So what do we know about zipping? Well, we know it's due to adhesion of lamellipodia and filopodia that basically adhere one to the other and allow to generate this adhesion. Okay. So if you think that adhesion is important, then what you can think is that perhaps the angle at which it zip matters, because you can imagine very simply, if you have a small angle, there's a lot of adhesion that will take place and that will generate forces. If you have a large angle, those adhesions will be small and you won't have less forces. And what we know about the physics of that is that this angle is probably set by force balance, meaning that you are by the balance of T1 and T2 here. And if T1 is big, then the angle is small. If T1 is small compared to T2, the angle is big. Okay, so that was our first hypothesis. So what the things that we did is to measure the angle-velocity relationship. And indeed, if the angle is small, we have fast zipping. If the angle is big, we have slow zipping. And over time, the angle is reducing. The second thing that we measure is try to assess whether there was a tension in this region. And by doing laser nanosurgery, we could cut and we could see that there is a fast retraction that takes place, showing that there is a high tension there. And that indeed, if we measure the angle after the cut, we have an increase of angle that follows this retraction. So this tension is important to set that. So how this tension is set, and this is the long story short, it's set by a usual suspect, which is actin and myosin, that are involved in this tissue, that what we call a SIM, that you can see here. This is myosin, it's more clear with a myosin signal, and that is reminiscent of the actin cable. Interestingly, is that the SIM is not only in the epidermis, but it's in both the epidermis and in the amnioserosa that is underneath. So there are two tissues that generate forces, and they are adhered to each other via integrins. Okay? And if we affect the integrins, so that's mispheroid in the Drosophila world, the angle does not reduce. So the SIM do not form, the angle do not reduce, and we don't reach high velocity, and we have defects in closure. So this is an important thing. So what I told you is basically it works like a zipper. And if you want to zip your jacket, what you do is to pull at the bottom to bring the leaflet and then to do that. So basically, the biology is doing the same. It pulls down and then it basically brings the thing up. How this is controlled? This is complex, but what we found is one key regulator that I talked about is the Jun kinase pathway that is involved in dorsal closure. And this is what you see here is a GNK sensor. So if you see nuclei, GNK is inactive. If you don't see nuclei, GNK is active. And what we could see is that GNK is active in the region of the SIM. All along the cable, this was known, but also in this region. And it gets inactive when the SIM disassembles. So, and interestingly, if you downregulate GNK, this is what you observe. You observe a dramatic detachment at the level of the zipping point, and basically the SIM cannot form, and it detaches and it blasts. On the other hand, if you maintain it active, then the SIM do not disassemble, and you see that basically you have a SIM that remains all the time there. Okay, so this is controlled by GNK. We believe this is mechanosensitive. We have some evidences that it is, but I will not go more into that for the maintenance of this tissue. And so basically what I told you is that this amnioserosa contract, and then this generates a force that reduces the angle and allow to progress the zipping. So interestingly, to go outside of Drosophila, this is neural tube closure in mice, and this is phalloidin staining. And what you could see is that behind the zipping point, you also have an enrichment of actin here, and I believe it's working in the same way. Okay, so now I told you how this guy contracts, how this guy is sealing. I will finish on the last player, and this is ongoing work, so that's not finished, which is on the epidermis. Actually, we were wondering whether the epidermis take a part in this process. So that's the epidermis. That's the epidermis here, and what we could observe is that while the closure occurs, the epidermis is stretching during this process. Okay, if you look carefully, this is the image of the stretching. So the cells are elongated, but you see that the stretching is patterned. At the bottom here, you have the cells that are very, very circular. It's not stretched all the way, and this is not random. So basically, this stretching is matching the expression of a specific gene. It's called PANIer, that's transcriptome factor. And the cells that express PANIer elongate, and the ones that do not express PANIer do not elongate. So the question that we wondered was, is this stretching something active or is purely passive? Okay. In order to do that, we looked at cadherin and myosin first, and what we could observe is that there is a polarization of myosin that occurs in this tissue during the stretch. It's not polarized before dorsal closure, and it becomes polarized at the moment of closure. And the same with cadherin, it's less obvious, but it is the case. And more interestingly, there is also polarization of membrane recycling. So we look at recycling events, and what we could observe is that before there is low activity of recycling, and during there is a higher activity, and there is, this is in this region, and there is polarization of the recycling. And if you affect this membrane recycling specifically in this region, in this Panier domain, then the cell do not elongate to the same extent, and you have defects, so it does not happen. So this is active. There's an activity. Now we are trying to understand mechanosensitivity in this process. So this I cannot show you yet because we don't know yet. And I will finish on that. So basically, yeah, there is several. So that's where we are. That's the effort that we have achieved. So we know how this contract via apoptosis and cell volume, that this is mechanosensitive. There's also some a zipper that pull here that generate force and also some mechanosensitivity, and then the last player that is there that also actively react to the tissue. And we believe that all these players that take place ensure the robustness of the process. So everything is made in order that it goes through. To come back to wound healing, why are we interested in wound healing? Because basically it's exactly sharing the same thing. It has the same regulatory machinery. So Jun kinase is also involved. Actomyosin is also involved. This is myosin that you are looking at on this movie. And apoptosis is also involved. So this is something that we try to understand now, how both are controlled, and try to see by understand one whether we can have insight on the other. Just to give you a flavor of what we are starting to do now on this. This is my last slide. So we have developed methods to probe tissue mechanics in vivo by applying force with magnetic bead. So that's the same force on two tissue. You see that the bead response is different. And by looking at the bead response and by looking at the deformation of the tissue, we can get insight into the mechanics. So we want to apply this method now in the context of wound healing and tissue sealing to try to really measure all the mechanical forces. And another aspect that is important, I don't know if it transpired from the talk, is modeling. And we are doing a lot of physical modeling. And this is just for fun. This is something that we did with Ignacio Alganda Carreras, a collaborator, trying to model a wound healing process with neural network. And we basically try to generate artificial data. So this is just the real data from the confocal, and this is all computed by the computer. And what we can is to generate quantitative similar wounds. It's not exactly the same. I see the face of Jean-Yves that is doing that. But we use this method, and now we combine that with physical modeling in order to get insight on how this is regulated. And I'm stopping here. I don't know if so this is this was my team. Now I need to take a new picture because we are much more. So the work that you have seen has been done in Barcelona and in Bilbao. So essentially for the bead manipulation, this is Arturo that did the work. Peran and Angie have done all the work on the amniocelosa and Amélie on the zipping. Elise is doing did the work on the epidermis stretching. That's external collaborators. Particularly, I want to thank Guillaume and Ignacio that are theoretical collaborator. And those are the fundings that we have. And this is where I live. To just give an example. And this is our institute that is a bit inside, but it's further 10 minutes from this region. And I would like to thank you for your attention.